This little puppy here is the new or fairly newish Sony a6400, and here's my thoughts on using it to shoot real estate video. Hi, I'm Grant, and Sony New Zealand very kindly sent me the new Sony a6400 with the Sony 10-18 wide lens, and I wanted to test it out to see what it's like for shooting real estate styles of video. So what is it? This is Sony's newest offering or newest camera in its Sony's A series lineup. So we have the Sony a6300 and we have the a6500 and now we have the a6400. It is a mirrorless interchangeable lens camera, and it is pretty much the mid-priced and a compact style of camera offering. Features. Essentially, Sony has packed a lot of video shooting features into the new Sony a6400. It can shoot video ranging from 1080p up to 4K. There is, however, no 50p or 60p recording in the 4K mode, only 30p. It has many, like a lot of the Sonys these days, has a very packed full Sony menu, and it has 10 Sony picture profiles, including Sony's S-Log2 and S-Log3, and Sony's new hybrid log gamma picture profile. It can shoot high frame rate recording for slow-mo up to 120 frames a second. It has a flip-out touch screen, but the touch screen is essentially only for locking autofocus. It doesn't really, you can't really adjust many of the other variables there. It has a mic in jack, but no headphone jack for monitoring audio. Now the Sony has image stabilization, but the elephant in the room, I feel, is that it doesn't have IBIS or in-body image stabilization such as its older brother, the Sony a6500 does. This is not really a big deal for shooting real estate style of video because you'll generally be on a handheld gimbal or a stabilizer or a tripod. However, I did a couple of tests, and here's some pictures of me hand holding it with the wide lens, just walking, shooting vlog style, and as you can see, the image stabilization isn't great. Now this may have ramifications when using this camera on a handheld gimbal, because even though the gimbal takes away the majority and smooths out the majority of the movement, it's still nice to have that extra bit of image stabilization where a little bit of jitter or shake may get through and it may ruin your shot. It has zebras and peaking, which I love using for judging and setting exposure and focus. Thank you very much, Sony. Now, obviously, most importantly, I tested the image quality of this camera in some typical real estate style shooting situations using both my camera slider and my handheld gimbal. I have to say the image quality, especially the 4K image quality, looks very nice. 1080p wasn't anything special, but running it in 4K 60 megabits a second actually was really quite good. I was also pleasantly surprised at how good the image looked and the economical size of the video files. For example, my GH5, which records in 100 megabits a second, shooting in either 1080 or 4K, has really quite large file sizes, whereas the 4K 60 megabits a second on this camera, it was actually a good image and quite economical in file size. Also on the gimbal, the a6500 is a compact and light unit, making it suitable for the smaller size style of gimbals that don't support the heavier camera systems. The picture quality looked great on the gimbal, although I did detect some small jitter, whether that was due to the Sony not having the in-body stabilization or it perhaps being on the too lighter side for my Moza Air gimbal. Again, for you real estate video shooters out there, remember that you can only shoot 50 or 60p at 1080, you don't have it at 4K. My favourite picture profile was PP3. I tried the S-Log3 mode, which sets the ISO to 500 on this camera, and it looked a little bit noisy to me. It would be hard for me to make a comment on the HLG or hybrid log gamma mode that Sony offers because I don't really understand, and from what I've read, it's essentially for playing back on TVs as opposed to a strict video production usage. Usability. Now, usability is a big deal for me, and often the compromise for having a small compact camera is that then it can be fiddly to use with the small buttons and dials. However, I have to say that the Sony a6400 actually sits, especially with this lens, actually sits quite nicely in the hand and it feels quite nicely balanced, and using the dials for both the shutter and aperture weren't too bad to use at all. However, that movie record button, even a small child's fingers would have trouble with that one. Luckily, you can program the movie record button and you can program it to the front shutter release button, which I did, because there is no way I could hit that small button consistently. You can also turn up the LCD monitor onto a bright setting, and it worked pretty well outdoors, even on bright days, although like most cameras on bright sunny days, there's virtually or hardly any LCD monitors built into cameras that are particularly good or easy to use. The Sony 10 to 18mm lens. Now the Sony a6400 has a crop factor of 1.534, I believe, which essentially gives your 10 to 18 lens a 35mm full frame equivalent of, let me double check my notes to make sure I've got this right, 15 to 27mm. A pretty nice range. In fact, when I shot some of these real estate shots, I was right on the 10 or the 15mm end of the lens, and I actually should have zoomed in a little bit more because I prefer the sweet spot of about 18 to 20mm. In fact, it was almost a little bit too wide for me. And to my eyes, the image quality coming out of this lens looked pretty good, and it looks pretty sharp from edge to edge. A stills photographer might be able to tell you different, and we'll go into more detail than what I can do, but video-wise, I think the lens looked good, and it would be a great lens for shooting, especially for shooting real estate interior styles of video. The hardest thing about this lens was focusing it, as it has one of those infinity lens barrel rings, which means you just screw and screw it, and it can go round and round basically as long as you want it to. So if you wanted to try doing a pull focus, pretty tricky. Price. At the time of recording this, the Sony a6400 body came in at US $898, and the Sony 10 to 18 f4 OSS optical stabilized or optical steady shot lens came in at US $798, giving you a total of US $1696. So not cheap, but also not expensive considering how much you'd pay just, for example, the Sony a7S body only. Another comparison, for example, is my Panasonic GH5 body, cost US $1497, and the Panasonic or equivalent Panasonic 7 to 14 lens f4 lens is $797, so a total of $2,294. So to conclude, would I recommend this camera and lens combination for shooting real estate video? And I'd have to say yes, I would. At that price point, at that mid-range price point, and for the full video feature set you get with this camera, you're actually getting quite a lot of bang for buck. And obviously, most importantly, the image looks great, especially the 4K 60 megabits a second image quality out of this camera. I thought it actually looked fantastic. However, if you're buying this camera and you are planning to do some handheld shooting with it as well, just be aware of the no in-body stabilization, and that could be a deal breaker depending on what you're doing. If that's the case, then maybe look at the Sony a6500, which does have the in-body stabilization. So if you have any thoughts on or have used the Sony a6400 and have any other thoughts, leave a comment below. And also, if shooting real estate video is your thing, don't forget to check out my top 5 tips for shooting real estate video over on my website, and I'll put the link below. So as always, I appreciate you watching, and I will see you in the next video.